Now, one person we did hear from today for the first time, Karen Reed herself, doubling down, of course, saying she did not do this. She wants to know who did.
Said it feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
And no, she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in the only one trying to save his life.
Why'd you admit to it?
She didn't admit to it. She didn't admit to anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And you should know that.
That was like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it.
No, she didn't.
That's not true.
She asked a question. She asked a question, which is very different. She didn't admit to anything.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, here we go. Today, I want to talk about Karen Reed and how she gets by with a little help from her fiends. In this case, it's Gretchen Voss, the journalist who wrote the Boston Magazine article that really became the template and did the first print interview with Karen Reed. That really became the template of the Karen Reed story from now to, I don't know when it's going to change, but pretty much everyone who, everyone else who talks about this case is, besides, I would say a few, are really stuck with the Gretchen Voss version of events. And she really interviewed Karen Reed, Aidan Carney, the blogger, Aidan Turtleboy Carney, and one person in the bar. I mean, most people wouldn't talk to her who was connected to this case. So it became Karen Reed's story. And it assumed all sorts of things just from Karen Reed's own words. Now, Gretchen Voss, we're going to look at 2 things today, maybe 3 things. We're going to look at Marie Russell's testimony, the end of it, Hank Brennan's final argument to Judge Cannoni. I would be surprised if Marie Russell is let in as an expert. I thought she did very poorly in these hearings. And if you looked at the defense, they seemed to be deflated. They tried to prop her up. Robert Alessi, Karen Reed's new pro bono lawyer, tried to prop her up, but you could see him kind of hunched over, objecting, and then propping her up. And what I mean by propping her up is feeding her the answers. So only asking her questions of which there could be multiple choice answers, A or B. So not even 3 multiple choice, just A or B. So she had a 50% chance of getting it right either way she went. So was this a big dog? This is just an example for Toad. Or a small dog? Was this the way that your methodology works? Or were you describing something else? That's the way he ended up asking his questions. I don't understand how Judge Cannoni could have missed it, but okay. But first off, we're going to deal with Gretchen Voss. And lucky for me, Innocence Fraud Watch has written a blog about Gretchen Voss, so I just thought I'd read that. Let me share my screen. Hold on one momento. So it's called Killer Karen Reed Retrial, Absurdity of Gretchen Voss and Her Latest Motion, and How She Is Still Gaslighting and Shilling for Murderer Karen Reed. So I added the Karen Reed at the end there. But just to leave no doubt that we're talking about Karen Reed, to whom Innocence Fraud Watch is asserting, and I am to some degree. I thought that I agree with Innocence Fraud Watch that this is, when you write from the accused killer's perspective, you get an innocence fraud narrative. There's no two ways about it. And why she didn't go to the Commonwealth and try to get a more balanced, at least, view, I don't know. I don't know if they would talk to her. All about judge and jury Gretchen Voss's interest, nothing whatsoever to do with the public's. Below are some extracts from Gretchen Voss's latest motion, which can be read in full here. I put the link in the description of this episode. In a nutshell, Voss submits that the court failed to give adequate weight to the public's interest in maintaining the free flow of information by protecting her promise to read. Why is she so beholden to Karen Reed? That the information at issue would not be disclosed without Reed's prior permission. Too bad, Gretchen Voss. The court says you have to give up your notes. There is no protection for journalists. There's no legal reason why Gretchen Voss shouldn't hand over her notes and the unedited tapes of the interview. And I think that what I'm thinking is they might be professionally embarrassing to her. They might have her also on tape making deals with the devil. They were so, if you remember back, these tapes of the Karen Reed, Gretchen Voss interviews were so edited that I believe the first, now this is from my memory, I remembered back a little bit better like a month ago when this was the hot issue. But I know that I think that there was, I'm trying to remember, the first interview was 2 hours, and I think they handed over, there was like over, I'm trying to remember exactly that. I don't want to say it wrong. Let me get back to you, but tons of redactions. I don't want to say because I don't want to be wrong, but it was like over an hour's worth of redactions. More redactions than what she handed over in one of the two tapes. And it was for what? For what? Now she legally has to hand over everything. And she's saying, will the court reconsider and allow me to keep my notes? I think the notes are the least, what I have the least interest in, because they can be argued as subjective and they're Gretchen Voss's perception of what was going on. I think a defense could argue. So I think they're less valuable than the unedited tapes of these interviews. Okay. By protecting her promise to read that the okay, hold on, let me start again. In a nutshell, Voss submits that the court failed to give adequate weight to the public's interest in maintaining the free flow of information by protecting her promise to read that the information at issue would not be disclosed without Reed's prior permission. At the same time, the court gave undue weight to the Commonwealth's interest in obtaining the confidential and unpublished work product and information from an off-the-record interview that is of little, if any, relevance and materiality to the criminal trial. Well, if it's of little relevance and materiality, certainly the Commonwealth, then most likely we won't see most of it. I don't think they're going to be showing, all of it will be submitted into evidence, but I don't think they're going to be showing the jury hours of unedited audio interview. Why does judge and jury Gretchen Voss know what is of relevance? Great question. Below are further extracts from Gretchen Voss's latest motion here. Argument. It is important for an investigative journalist to be able to safeguard the confidential information she is provided off the record. Agreements between a reporter and her source to keep certain information confidential are a routine and critical part of the work of an investigative journalist. Such agreements grease the wheels of journalism. Interviews conducted off the record are routine tools of the investigative journalist trade. They are essential in building trust between journalists and the viewers, allowing for candid discussions that can provide context or background without the risk of public disclosures. So she's saying that, first of all, she made a promise to Karen Reed to keep it off the record, but Gretchen Voss could not promise her that the Commonwealth would not get this material because, like I said, there is no protection for journalists like this in Massachusetts, and Karen Reed should have checked it out. Investigative journalist, who is Gretchen Voss kidding? Further extracts from Gretchen Voss's latest motion here below, whether one is talking about a single off-the-record comment or an entire off-the-record interview, a reporter's freedom to make and keep such a promise is normally taken for granted. Not if you're being tried for murder. Sorry, that goes out the window. You chose, Gretchen Voss, to interview and write a very rosy picture of Karen Reed, and you had to know that she was coming up to trial. You lucked out at the first trial when they didn't get this, but Hank Brennan's got it. Judges demanded it, now hand it over. On those rare occasions when a reporter is required by a court to turn over confidential information provided to her by a source, there is a cost in terms of free flow of information to the public. First of all, Karen Reed isn't a source. She's not a secret source. This isn't confidential information. It's only confidential to Karen Reed. Karen Reed knew the risk she was taking. She knew she could have maintained her right to silence. That was her right. But once she gives it up, she has to know that there's no protection, again, like this for journalists, and that the unedited tapes, notes, phone calls, etc. could be handed over. More absurd statements by Gretchen Voss, where the court erred is that it treated the off-the-record handwritten notes in the exact same way as it treated the on-the-record audio recordings, when in fact the Commonwealth made no showing whatsoever that there was relevant information contained in these notes. It's relevant because it's about Karen Reed, who's facing a second-degree charge in this case. The Commonwealth provides no indication about what information it seeks or hopes to find from these handwritten notes. That's not your business, Gretchen Voss. Rather, Voss has confirmed that no statements made by Reed in this interview were included in the article as published. Just trust Gretchen Voss, everybody. Just trust what she has to say. I just want to go back to something. I just want to circle back here that she thinks that the public, between journalists and their viewers, okay, interviews are conducted off the record, are routine tools of the investigative journalist trade. What was she investigating? How do you investigate when you talk to 3 people, and don't talk to the majority of the people impacted by the case? They are essential in building trust between journalists and their viewers, allowing for candid discussions that can provide context or background without the risk of public disclosures. So she thinks the public will be totally let down if her notes were handed over. Give me a break. You have to prove that the public has such trust in journalists to begin with. Trust, I mean, I'm the daughter also of a journalist, so, I understand it's very easy for people to say, oh, the media is so terrible, but there has never been a time when the media had such a bad rap as now. It has gone downhill every decade as news became, or serious journalistic, first of all, there was a changeover in newspapers and magazine and just the amount of money that all these places had when the internet came out. But also news became entertainment. Started in the early 80s, sort of switching over to entertainment style. So we don't hear serious news reports anymore about what's happening in other countries, and also very focused very solely on the country that you're living in. At least that's American news. So I thought those arguments were not great for Gretchen Voss. I'm not a big fan of Gretchen Voss. I go back to the messages she sent Turtle Boy, meaning Aidan Carney, the blogger, talking badly about the O'Keefe family and John O'Keefe's friends. Maybe we can revisit that at the end of the episode. But just disappointing that she's fighting this. I don't think she's going to get far. Oh, actually, here it is. I don't think we have to return to it. Let me share my screen and show you exactly one of many reasons why I don't like Gretchen Voss. I think there's someone who's been killed in this case. There's a grieving family looking for justice, and she's holding on to her notes and talking about how we're all going to be really sad and not have any trust in journalists if she has to hand over her notes. Because everybody, this small case, even small for true crime, everybody's going to remember that Gretchen Voss had to hand over her notes in this case and unedited audio. Give me a break. So let me just, this is from Innocence Fraud Watch. Again, she put it in her blog. Gretchen Voss decided to get ratchet with me today in the media line. Here's what she really thinks of the O'Keefe family and the Dugals. So that's Carl Dugall. So you heard Dougal, excuse me. I don't know why I'm calling him Dugall. Dougal, who's in the opening saying, why did she admit to it? She had, like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it. This is my favorite. She did not admit to it. She asked a question, which is very different. Very different. She asked a question a lot in the form of an admission many times. Gretchen, yep. The O'Keefe and the Dugals, but that was before David Traub got to her with his burger. Yep, the Jersey and me was this close to asking Carl Dougal's wife, who spent the entire hearing staring at me and rolling her eyes with this disgusting smirk on her face to take it outside. She wasn't so tough with you after. Nice work, all between us. Of course, Aiden Carney shares it. Off the record doesn't mean anything to him when it comes to his social media. Oh, wait, she's with CAA in New York. Used her before. Okay. But the hostility directed at me from the O'Keefe side at court was insane. I had introduced myself to Carrie before, and she said they wouldn't speak to me if I was writing about the blogger. Dagger stares even from Mrs. O'Keefe. Oh, okay, so that's it. So I'm not surprised she got dagger stares, but why is she sending personal messages to Aiden Carney like that and disparaging John O'Keefe's friends and the O'Keefe family, even if they were throwing daggers? I understand why they threw daggers at her, because she ignited this conspiracy narrative with her story, and she gave it credit in her piece. That's why. So going back to Marie Russell, thought we'd revisit some of the, unfortunately, what was missing out of yesterday's episode was all the crazy things Marie Russell said in the first hearing. So I thought I edited it down a bit. I thought we'd listen to that, and then we can pick up where we picked off yesterday at about 45 minutes in. Here's Marie Russell being cross-examined by Hank Brennan in the first part of the hearing.
Good afternoon, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
My name's Hank Brennan. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting before.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. You shared with us that you have an extensive history of experience in the emergency room.
Yes.
And in the emergency room, you see all types of injuries, don't you?
Yes.
You see physical injuries? Yes?
Yes.
Emotional injuries?
Yes.
People who overdose, perhaps they're drunk on drugs?
Yes.
Alcohol?
Yes.
So you cover a wide array of different types of treatments.
Yes.
Now, you must have seen a number of broken bones when you were in the emergency room caring for different patients, correct?
Thousands.
Arms, legs, toes?
Yes.
In light of your extensive experience in the emergency room, and looking at all of these broken bones, that doesn't make you an expert in orthopedics, does it?
So she says she's an expert in emergency orthopedics, which is, I looked it up, and there's no such expert out there that testifies in emergency orthopedics. Either they're an orthopedic surgeon or they have some kind of specialty. This is why we don't see generally emergency room doctors testifying about a broad subject. Like, I'm just an emergency doctor. I could testify about car crashes, dog bites, etc. She claims her interest was in the bite and hold technique. Now she's changed that to being a dog bite expert right across the board. So she was trying, from working in a jail, she said she'd seen, I don't know if she saw one or more than one, injuries from police dogs where they were trained to bite and hold. And she was calling that abusive. Never mind that generally, if you have the police dogs set on you, you're fleeing or you're generally trying to run away from the situation, not cooperating, but okay. But now that has changed to now she's just a dog bite expert all across the board. So here she says she's an expert in emergency orthopedics. The phrase that comes to mind is delusions of grandeur. She thinks that no one else, she said in last hearing, Tuesday's hearing, that no one else is as qualified as she is in dog bites. Reading the few articles that she has, and never having testified as an expert in any court about dog bites. But no one is as qualified as she is. And then when the evidence came in about against Karen Reed, she seemed to be unfamiliar with almost all of it, which is really important. And by the way, let me just pull this. All right. I just wanted to pull up something. Hold on 1 second. So this is a dog bite expert named Ron Berman, but I just wanted to show you, I don't know anything about the quality of him as an expert, but I just want to show you what he talks about on his, so he's an expert witness in dog bites, what he talks about on his website. So a dog bite expert can support your case by letting the defense know you are serious, evaluating the dog and owner. Okay, that's something Marie Russell wasn't interested in, looking at Chloe's mouth impressions. Didn't talk to the owner, videotaping the evaluation. She's never seen the dog. Many jurors feel that the evaluation video is the most powerful evidence, providing testimony on important areas such as provocation, landlord knowledge of dangerous propensity, dog's prior behavior history, owner negligence, proper containment of the dog, proper handling of the dog, dynamics of the attack. These are all areas that she has no knowledge in. Preparing in-depth deposition questions, securing evidence, impeachment of the opposing expert, neutralizing false claims made by opposing counsel. And then they go into, and if you read Jim Crosby's stuff, it has so much to do with the scene too. Something else that she didn't evaluate or consider. So.
Emergency orthopedics, yes.
Oh. Have you ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No, I've never.
Isn't orthopedics a specialty in medicine where there is specific training?
Yes.
And people who become orthopedics or orthopedic surgeons, they go through rigorous education specifically to be an orthopedic, right?
Well, orthopedics involves more than just setting fractures or diagnosing fractures. Orthopedics involves things like bone tumors, bone cancers, a lot of other parts of orthopedics.
Really? Are people really diagnosing serious things like this in the emergency room? My experience, at least in New York, is they tell you to go to a specialist. They bend over backwards not to diagnose things like this that need multiple evaluations. But I guess if you have some kind of major accident, it comes up on your scan, maybe.
Not just trauma. I am an expert in emergency orthopedics, I believe.
So you have decided that you are an expert in orthopedics?
Emergency orthopedics.
Hank Brennan, right on the money there. So you've decided that you're an expert? You've decided? Yes, she's decided. She is self-appointed expert. And boy, did the Free Karen readers come out in the comments. We'll get to it. We'll get to your comments, but lots of support. That I'm not saying that Karen Reed isn't entitled to a dog expert, but they have to be an expert in dogs. And I think she's going to be hard pressed to find one that just based on a picture is going to say, I'm absolutely certain it's a dog bite, not taking in the totality of the evidence. It's going to want to risk their name on it. There's a lot of sleazy experts out there who's willing to get involved in a high profile trial, but usually you have to have some kernel, tiny acorn that you can grow into a big oak that you can exploit. And it has to be bigger than it looks like a dog bite. It's similar to. I was saying maybe it was yesterday, that she's someone who would this is like someone who sees the Virgin Mary in their toast or on the side of a wall or something. There's a lot of things that look like other things that aren't. How many times have you said to your friends, oh, doesn't that look like, I don't know, doesn't that person look like that person, but it's not? Or doesn't that look like this, but it's not? I mean, that's the essence of fraud, is to make something look like something it's not. To make a guilty person look innocent, there's innocence fraud. To pretend to be, for all those online fraudulent claims, pretending to be a Kenyan prince and you're not. Money troubles.
Emergency orthopedics, is that a specialty that you get a fellowship in, or somehow you are deemed an expert in any way?
It's not a specialty that has a fellowship that I'm aware of.
I see. So you're proclaiming that you yourself think that you're an emergency room orthopedic?
I have expertise in emergency orthopedics, yes.
Are you an expert in orthopedics?
The whole field of orthopedics, no.
And you don't have any specialized degrees in orthopedics, do you?
No.
You would agree that somebody who's gone through the rigorous requirements of being an orthopedic and qualified, they'd have much more experience in that than you. True?
In general orthopedics, yes. I have a lot of experience in orthopedic trauma related to emergencies.
Have you ever been in any court where you've ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
It was never an issue.
But I'm asking you, have you ever been in any court, state, federal, this country, any other country, where you've been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Has anybody other than yourself ordained you?
It's never been an issue. Last time I got in here, Judge Canoni just let me in, and I didn't even know the phrase to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, and I got in. So it's never been an issue for me. Never testified as an expert in emergency orthopedics.
As an expert in orthopedics?
I haven't ordained myself as an expert in orthopedics. I have a lot of knowledge and expertise in emergency orthopedics.
Has any authority ever recognized?
She just said that she was an expert in emergency orthopedics. This is what these fraudsters do. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. 65 CJ5 says she's the epitome of a charlatan, isn't she? I called all the defense witnesses besides Arca, which, we're just innocent fraudsters, basically, who were, again, making great claims on not seeing the totality of the evidence. But Lucky Loughran, Richard Green, and Marie Russell, I all called garbage defense witnesses. And I think a rational jury will not take to them.
You qualified you as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Just you.
I haven't declared myself an expert in orthopedics. I have expertise
You've seen a lot of car accidents, you shared with us,
Yes.
as a police officer,
Yes.
in the emergency room,
Yes.
perhaps when
I'm not a cat expert. I just have expertise, decades of experience, hands-on experience dealing with felines. That's why I get paid the big bucks for being a cat expert. Right, Tammy? You're a cat expert too. Tammy's got the cutest cat, Gizmo. Such a beautiful, beautiful cat.
you were at the ME's office, you saw the consequence of car accidents.
I did. Yes.
Are you an expert in accident reconstruction?
Reconstruction? No.
And when you see the different people that come in with overdoses, whether it's alcohol or drugs, you treat them, don't you?
Yes.
But you're not an expert toxicologist.
I'm not a toxicologist, no. But toxicology is a part of emergency medicine. So we have training in orthopedic, in toxicology, but no, I am not an expert in toxicology.
I'm not suggesting you're unfamiliar with it or you haven't had experience or some training. I'm asking you if you think you're an expert.
In toxicology?
Yes.
No.
And you've shared with us.
Right. I have experience doing algebra, but I wouldn't call myself an algebra expert. There's a different line when you're calling yourself an expert and paying money to testify. And that's what I find so offensive about Marie Russell. Here she is sitting there with John O'Keefe's friends and family in the gallery in front of them, flying by the seat of her pants, changing her answers from 1 minute to the next and her opinions, anything to just get picked and be relevant. And I don't know what money, I think money is second to relevance. It's very important to her that she be seen as an important person, and she's already a legend in her own mind.
That you agree you don't have any expertise in DNA.
That's correct.
In fact, you know very little about DNA, don't you?
I would say that's pretty reasonable, yes.
That's what you said.
Yes.
Oh. You mentioned that you are generalizing or approximating the number of dog bite cases.
Because justice for the victim's family is of little importance. The most important thing to Marie Russell is that she gets her day in the sun and gets to be seen as the all-important expert in something. Like I said, there was already newspaper articles written about her before, which I'm sure she went out and solicited. A one-of-a-kind trauma doctor. She's one of a kind. Who knows how this came about? It's striking how much Dr. Marie Russell still thinks like a cop. In her prized time, she manages to put the darkness aside to swim or camp, although she does admit her preferred recreational reading is true crime, namely Turtle Boy's blog. She loves reading that. She's like a turtle rider who literally came off of the street.
You've attended to in the emergency room relative to civilian dogs or domestic dogs, is that right?
Yes.
And you've suggested that you probably treated about one dog a week over a period of 27 years, yes?
Yes.
This is 1,000 weeks in your estimation.
Yes.
You worked for some of the most busiest ERs. Was there a lot of patients every day that you treated?
Yes.
On average, how many patients would you treat in the ER over those 27 years on a daily basis?
Daily, I would think about 30.
So if you're treating 30 patients a day over a course of a week, and you consider that in the context of 1,000 weeks, the amount of dog bite cases that you treated in the ER is about 0.5%. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
No, you lost me on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, if you had one dog bite case a week, and say you had 20 cases a day, 100 a week,
Mm-hmm.
That would be 1% of your patients.
Right. He's saying it's 1% of your job was seeing dog bites. And I think he's trying to hint at the fact that she only sees 30 patients a day for 10 years, even. You know, how many? Remember, she ended her career in the 90s. So how many patients could she actually see? Then she said that she's seen hundreds of thousands of dog bites later on.
Oh, it could, yes.
The next hearing.
Yes, but it's the number of cases, not the percentage that was asked of me.
I'm just asking you a question.
Okay. I just want to clarify that.
And so you said how many? 25, 30 a day?
Patients, yes.
So that's less than 1% of the cases that you treated in the ER relative to dog bites.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's average, actually.
Now, when you treated cases of dog bites in the ER, you said that you would sometimes have the reporter, the person injured or somebody with them, tell you it was a dog bite.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes with communication difficulties, there was a reason.
So pay attention to this part. This happens to be my favorite part of Hank Brennan's entire questioning. I think this is one of the more telling parts of the questioning.
Reason why they couldn't share it with you.
Yes.
And then you suggested that's how you came to this pattern recognition skill, is that you would have to determine the injury with no help from the reporter.
Okay, so what she said in her direct was that there were times when someone came into the ER and they couldn't tell her. This is, I believe, Robert Alessi's special edition. In addition to probably putting her out on the web, she seems to have raised her profile on the web quite a bit, going on websites for experts. I'm wondering if Karen reads. At first, I thought that Marie Russell was maybe footing the bill, but now I'm thinking maybe that's something Robert Alessi added her to all these websites for one for $700. I think it's $700 a year to be listed as an expert. So he's risen her profile, but he added this idea, I believe, but it was a new part of her testimony in her direct with Robert Alessi, Karen Reed's pro bono lawyer, that there were times when patients could not tell her they had been bitten by a dog, and she had to determine, using her fine detective skills, what animal they had been bit by. Is it a possum? Is it a cat? Is it a cheetah? And she determined that it was a dog. So here's Hank Brennan asking her to tell us about one of those times, just from memory.
Was always interested in dog bites, and yes, there were a few occasions when I had to use those skills in order to determine what kind of an animal it
Let's
was.
talk about those few occasions. Why don't you share with us a story where you met a patient, that you can recall, where you had no idea what the injury may have been because there was no ability to communicate, and tell us about how you determined it was a dog.
Well, thinking about a specific case, I can think of cases where I determined it wasn't a dog bite, and it was something else based on the pattern of the bite. And am I not answering your question?
I'm not looking for cases where you couldn't determine the dog bite. I want you to share some of this wealth of experience you have in dog bites, and share with us, if you will, one of the cases where there was no information that it was a dog bite for whatever reason, and then you, based on your pattern recognition skills, determined that it was a dog bite. I want you to walk through an actual case that you can recall that you had with this scenario you presented.
I can't give you a specific case because, again, in the overall scheme of emergency medicine and the frequency that dog bites are to other cases, it's just not a case that I would remember that kind of the specifics of the case.
Interesting.
Right, but if you're saying that that's happened, there has to be one memory you're thinking of. That means that it's totally made up. There has to be one time when you can share that story with the court. All right. We've already been going for 45 minutes, and I'm not even halfway done through this. This is ridiculous. Everything takes me longer than I think it's going to take, but that'll give you a good idea. I'm going to take a quick break and move on to, so I will be back in an hour, in a minute, guys, not an hour, a minute. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back in a minute.
A glass of wine. Roberta will be back in no time. This podcast is listener supported, so smash that like button and subscribe, or become a patron for exclusive content if you are so inclined. Have something to say? Shoot Roberta a super chat. She will do her best to read it on air without delay. Now Roberta's back and ready to put the true back in true crime. Here's Roberta.
Okay, I am back. Sorry about that. All right. So I think I'm going to pull this and get to, since we are short on time, get to yesterday's hearing with where we left off yesterday.
Speak, Your Honor.
Yes.
Dr. Russell. He had commented that the wounds at 2 to 3 millimeters, up to 7 centimeters, were documented on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, and the injuries do not photographically appear to be, nor are described as puncture bite wounds, and thus are highly unlikely to be the result of an animal bite attack. Did you get that expert opinion from the United States Attorney's Office when they investigated this case to consider as part of peer review?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I did not get that, but...
Did you say you did get that?
No, I did not get that. However,
okay.
I have a comment about that.
Go ahead.
Please.
Not very medical exam, not very many medical examiners.
Tammy asks a great question. Thanks for the super chat. And Pats to Gizmo. Great kitty. Why, if we think she is not really experienced and very childish answers, would Karen Reed's team of attorneys that seem smart, yet they want her on the stand? Because all she has to do is get one person doubtful that it was that Karen Reed clipped John O'Keefe with her car. That's it. One. So, like I said, I was talking about my experience as a juror on a criminal case last year. And the first vote was 11-1, 11 guilty, of which I was a part of. And there was one woman who thought this child essayist was not guilty, and he testified, and that's where I thought it really all crumbled for him. But she found him credible. So you don't know who that one juror is going to be, Tammy. That's my thinking, but you're right. And I think that they may had better luck not putting on a defense and just doing it through cross-examination, because I didn't think Lucky Lawfern was a very good witness. Thought he was destroyed in cross. Richard Green, same thing. And Marie Russell, I thought was all I called them garbage defense witnesses. So what Hank Brennan just wants to eliminate any chance of confusing the jury with, she doesn't have any science or methodology that is key. I mean, we can go to the standard of Dalbert standard. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'll just go to Wikipedia. Hold on one second, guys. So this is the standard. In the United States federal law, the Dalbert standard is a rule of evidence regarding the admissibility of expert witness testimony. A party may raise a Dalbert motion, a special motion in limine. So in limine is usually, that means like a motion to basically eliminate someone from the trial as an expert, or eliminate some piece of evidence, or exclude is a better word, some piece of evidence. The Dalbert trilogy are the 3 United States Supreme Court cases, Dalbert versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, which held that Rule 702 of the Federal Rules of Evidence did not incorporate the Frye standard. Oh, I'd have to read about that. But I believe that was mentioned. I know one Merrill Dow Pharmaceutical case was mentioned in Hank Brennan's motion, General Electric's, blah, blah, blah. So the judge is gatekeeper. Under Rule 702 of the Federal Rule of Evidence, the task of gatekeeping or assuring that scientific expert testimony truly proceeds from scientific knowledge rests on this trial judge. Relevance and reliability. This requires the trial judge to ensure that the expert testimony is relevant to the task at hand and that it rests on a reliable foundation. Concerns about expert testimony cannot be simply referred to the jury as a question of weight. Furthermore, the admissibility of expert testimony is governed by Rule 104, not Rule 104B. I'm sorry, let me go do that again. The admissibility of expert testimony is governed by Rule 104A, not Rule 104B. Thus, the judge must find it more likely than not that the expert's methods are reliable, and reliability applied to the facts at hand. Scientific knowledge, scientific equals scientific method, methodology. So this is why Hank Brennan was asking so many questions about asking Marie Russell about her methodology. A conclusion will qualify as scientific knowledge if the proponent can demonstrate that it is the product of sound scientific methodology derived from the scientific method. Illustrative factors, the court defined scientific methodology as the process of formulating hypothesis and then conducting experiments to prove or falsify the hypothesis and provide a set of illustrative factors in determining whether these criteria are met, whether the theory or technique employed by the expert is generally accepted in the scientific community, whether it has been subjected to peer review and publication, whether it can be and has been tested, whether it has known error rate. So if Marie Russell has published articles in peer-reviewed publications, that doesn't mean that her methodology has been peer-reviewed. Whether it can be and has been tested. No, it can't be tested to say, I've seen so many and it looks like. That is not a methodology. Whether it has a known error rate, whether the research was conducted independent of the particular litigation or dependent on an intention to provide the proposed testimony. So that'll just give you a little idea of the standard. There that we're talking about when we're talking about experts.
Have the experience that first of all, have experience with dog bites, seeing hundreds and thousands of dog bites and treating them. And not very many medical examiners have even autopsied a case of dog bites. So although, some physicians have certain opinions based on, based on what they know, they don't have my experience. I'm sorry.
Do you know if Mr. Walsh had your experience or not?
I don't know, who is
The
it?
gentleman who gave this opinion that was employed by the federal government, do you know if he had your experience or not?
What's his name?
Mr. Walsh, John Walsh.
No, I don't.
So he could have more experience for all you know.
Oh, I'm highly unlikely.
Okay, you have more experience than anybody in the country.
I think I have at least as much experience as any other possible person in the country. And I have it from both aspects, from the clinical aspect and from the forensic aspect.
Did you review the opinion of Dr. Kenneth Kinsey, who said that those injuries were not caused by a canine?
Dr. who?
Kenneth Kinsey.
No.
No. If you look, I believe Mr. O'Keefe's arm were completely bent when he sustained the injuries. A lot of them match up. They're a continuation of another injury.
And I don't even know who Dr. Kinsey is.
Okay.
Is that a medical doctor?
So you don't have any peer review at all? You have nobody who's given an opinion similar to yours about this being dog bites, do you?
Is Dr. I'm sorry.
You have no peer review. You have no peer endorsement. Everything that you have no peer endorsement for any of your opinions, do you?
I didn't think I was allowed to show these pictures to.
Here's Karen Reed acting inappropriately in court after being admonished. You really should be writing any comments or questions you have to your lawyer, and you should not be whispering through your expert witness's testimony. It's distracting for the judge. It's just rude.
Anyone.
When you're giving opinions about the teeth and suggesting that there's might be bend, things you don't really know about, you would agree it would be best to look at the dog, Chloe itself, right?
Not necessary.
If you looked at Chloe and examined Chloe, you would know whether or not there are any irregularities.
She's Marie Russell, and she decides what's necessary and what's not. If she says it's not necessary to look at the dog, it's not necessary. Never mind that every other dog expert that I've read, which is just two, this Ron Berman, dog expert, bite expert, expert witness and consultant, and Jim Crosby, who's going to testify for the Commonwealth, has said that the dog is hugely important. Should I do a Marie Russell? I've looked at hundreds of experts, dog bite experts, hundreds of thousands of dog bite experts. And they all say looking at the dog, and in fact, it's two. They overreached, and what happened here is Robert Alessi thought they could prop her up with a lot of BS, and they got exposed. I remember when I was in college, and there's a lot of reading and a lot of writing at Sarah Lawrence. And one of the classes we had, we were we had to read from, say, a Tuesday to a Thursday, a big, long, boring book, which was not unusual, but this was particularly, I found it dry and not of interest. Apparently the rest of the class did, because we're supposed to be having a discussion about this book that we were all supposed to just read. And the teacher starts talking about how the main character died in the end and blah, 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 blah. And one person around the round table is shaking her head and the rest of us are nodding. And and my professor goes, well, I know that only one of you has read the assignment. What happened here? Because she just started saying something that didn't happen in the book, and only one person was like confused by it. So similarly here, they basically thought that they could just skate, just make these claims. Like, there have been tons of times when people couldn't tell me what animal they got bit by. Can you tell us one time? I don't think anybody counted on Hank Brennan asking really specific questions based on this supposed experience.
In Chloe's teeth, wouldn't you?
Yes, I might.
You would see it, wouldn't you?
Well, if I got close enough, and
right.
I don't know if I want to get close enough to Chloe.
Well, why wouldn't you want to? You're a medical doctor. You want to have an opinion to a degree of medical certainty.
I graduated from Sarah Lawrence College, Tammy, in Bronxville, New York. It's now famous for having a guy, for one of the students' father named Larry Ray went right from prison to live at his daughter's student housing on campus and started a cult. And I attended that trial, the Larry Ray trial. And sometime I've really been meaning to do an episode, because I've just noticed there's a lot of, seems to be a lot of the actual facts of that case have gotten buried and aren't talked about.
Why wouldn't you want to see the best evidence of the distance between the teeth and Chloe? Why wouldn't you?
I'd have to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in danger.
Okay. And if you saw Chloe, you could see if there was any missing teeth, couldn't you?
Yes.
You could actually measure the canines in Chloe, and then you could compare them to what you're calling dog wounds on Mr. O'Keefe's arm. You could do that, couldn't you?
I would have to get a veterinarian to sedate the patient, the dog, because that going near that dog would be very dangerous. They'd have to sedate the dog to measure the intercanine distance.
What if you did get a veterinarian to sedate the dog, and then you could safely go and look at Chloe, and you could actually take a mold of Chloe's mouth, right? Mm-hmm. Yes? You've read that in the literature. The best way to I'm sorry.
Yes. Only one person.
You've read in the literature the best way to compare the teeth and the mark is you actually do a mold of the dog's mouth. You know how valuable that can be in analysis, don't you?
It can be, but the question, I believe the question here is not which dog created these wounds, but did a dog create these wounds?
That's not my question. My question is, if you took a mold of Chloe's mouth, you would see the distance between the canines. And you could measure it, quantify it, not guess and speculate, quantify it, correct?
Your Honor, could we approach, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Did I miss cutting this thing out? I did. Okay, so now we're on to Hank Brennan's closing argument here, which I thought was brilliant. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
62.
Wait, hold on one second.
I'd like to start with a couple of very important cases for your Honor's consideration. The first is one out of the District of Massachusetts Federal Court. It's Hines 55 Federal Supplement, second, page 62. It's a 1992 case, authored by Judge Gardner. It had to do with a soft science handwriting analysis. It was a very thorough and thoughtful case that talked about soft sciences, methodology, and when there is an absence of methodology. In that case, I'm sure Your Honor is aware, it had to do with a proposed witness who wanted to look at a handwriting exemplar and provide an opinion of a so-called match. The court said there were very important canons, very important principles or foundations that have to be considered when we're discussing a soft science. Empirical study is not enough. Simply because somebody has seen something before, whether it's once or twice or 100 times, is not a science. It's not a methodology.
He's absolutely correct. So now we understand, or at least I do, by reading Daubert, how much methodology is important to being approved as an expert. And this is something that she said over and over, meaning Marie Russell said over and over again, was I've seen it so many times. I know from my experience. But so it's very different. But when she was asked, what I'm trying to get at is when she was asked how she determined these were dog bites and went through the specific injuries, which I didn't show because I like to be respectful to the O'Keefe family and not show John O'Keefe's injured body on my channel. But when he went through and specifically went through and showed, what is this mark? These dog teeth would have to be upside down. Well, yeah, clearly the dog, was pulling from the other way or had its head up. I don't know what she was saying. It just every point that seemed to debunk her made her more certain. Well, I wasn't surprised that there were pieces of tail light in John O'Keefe's shirt. Really? Why not? Why weren't you surprised? You said he couldn't have possibly been clipped or hit by a car. The only explanation is dog bites. And why? How do you think they got there? That's what I would have liked to hear from her. I wish Hank Brennan had asked.
It's not medicine. It is a personal aside. A potential expert has to be in a better position to that means there has to be some level of methodology, some type of guidance, some type of study so that they can assist the jury in better understanding what they believe their conclusions are. Empirical is not enough because a subjective opinion without medical, factual, scientific support is just an opinion. A person can look at the constellations and see the Big Dipper, they can see Orion. It's a matter of perspective. It's no different when we have something like a soft science, something different.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. How many times have you looked at the stars and been like, there's the Big Dipper? And someone's like, oh no, that's not the Big Dipper. There is the Big Dipper. It's like she's reading tea leaves. It's calling it a science.
And DNA, where a person wants to give an opinion because they've seen something before. That's not enough. And in this case, Dr. Russell has never been in the business of identifying dog bite wounds. She treats them. She's an emergency room physician, had some experience as an ME. She treats a wound that is brought to her. She's not diagnosing the wound or determining the mechanics of injury. She doesn't have the education, she doesn't have the qualifications, she doesn't have the training for that. That is not what her job is. It is to treat the injuries. And so all of her perspective and opinions are empirical. She doesn't have a book. She doesn't have a study that teaches her how to. She never took a training. She never took a class. She never got a degree or certificate. She is looking at her past experience when someone reports to her that it was a dog bite wound, and she's trying to use her memory and make a decision whether or not she thinks this is similar. That is not science. That is not medical certainty. And so there is nothing to suggest that whatever method she used, and I still can't identify it because I don't know, despite many questions of asking her, what her methodology is, other than she says it's pattern recognition analysis. It's empty phrasing unless you can identify and articulate what is the specificity, what is the standard, and we still don't know. After all of this testimony, we don't know. In Campbell versus Rintala, that case had to do with a prosecution expert talking about paint spill, and this is could not fit more closely to this case. The conviction was overturned because the prosecution called the paint spill expert. It was found to be prejudicial because the expert relayed their past experience about paint spills. Exactly what Dr. Russell did in this case. No more, no less. Her past experience treating injuries that were reported as dog bites, a person with their past experience with paint spills. The court was very specific in Rinaldi about why this was improper and why it was prejudicial. It said that just because a witness has experience or a particular experience and decides to use that as a methodology does not make it methodology. And it's just like Dr. Russell's testimony. There is nothing about it that employs methodology. In Rinaldi, pardon?
Rintala.
Thank you. In Rintala, direct the court to page 39. And it talks about when the expert used methods to determine that paint was poured or spilled. And the problem, why this case was...
That's interesting that, again, he got someone's name wrong. There was a moment, and in the same way, where he made their name slightly more interesting, and I think he called it, what was it? It was a author that Russell had cited, and it was something like Vale. He called it, did he call it Volte, and it was Vale or something like that? And here he's calling the motion or the court case or the decision Rinaldi, and it's Rinal. So that's just if we've seen any, Hank Brennan certainly comes off like a Clark Kent Superman in the courtroom. I was talking to my friend today about how this is very interesting to me because just looking at the way Judge Cannoni treats him, he comes off as the alpha dog in the courtroom. Used to be Yannetti. Yannetti used to have the biggest reputation in Massachusetts, and Cannoni would really defer to Yannetti and Jackson by proxy. But now that Brennan is there, Brennan's the big dog, and the defense is getting treated less well, I think, than they did, or being not given quite the deferential treatment that they once were. I think it has to do with his reputation, which must be very good in the Massachusetts legal community.
Reverse, the court said, instead, meaning the expert, he simply relayed his past experiences working with and around paint and drew conclusions therefrom. That is exactly what Dr. Russell has done. She has relayed her past experiences working with and around treating dog bites and drew her conclusions from that. They cite Campbell versus Franceschi. Probably saying that wrong as well. But what that quotes is, while training and experience, to which the expert referred, might have taught the expert methodology, it is not itself a methodology. And so while Dr. Russell may have taught herself or been intrigued or interested in dog bites, it is no methodology. The defense has introduced a couple of articles Those articles do not describe or lay out methodology for identifying.
Right. So, you know, it would be one thing if she were to be talk about I don't know, if she were an expert witness in a case that had to do with something that happened in an emergency room, she might be better suited. Or the standard, or talk about the standard of care or something. But this is where she's being asked to identify wounds and she can't tell how she did it. It's a problem. There are all kinds of different experts. But she can't even say what is usual and remarkable, and you know, or how she does it. It's a problem. So to go back to Hank Brennan, if there's one chink in his armor that we've seen, it's names, remembering names correctly and making them slightly more ethnically interesting than they actually are.
Dog bite wounds. They don't provide a standard. They do not provide a comparison. They don't provide any guidance. And so the danger in having somebody go before a jury and portray themselves as an expert when they have no methodology is they can pretty much provide any opinion they want to the jury that can be unchecked because it's not factually based. It can't be compared. It can't be analyzed. It's not peer reviewed. It's just an opinion. And when an expert lacks methodology, classic things happen, which happened in this case. What happens is that a witness does not actually have certainty about what they're saying. A witness is prone to change their opinion because there is no standard or methodology to confine them. A witness can just change their mind without new information because it suits their purpose. When we looked at Exhibit 5, and we actually broke down the wounds into separate wounds, 5 wounds, the doctor, I believe, concedes when you look at each of those abrasions independently. She cannot say it was scientific.
So I don't have very many free Karen readers listening, but I do have a few occasionally. And I just want to speak to the free Karen readers out there. This is not Hank Brennan excluding witnesses just so that Karen Reed won't be able to defend herself. The reason why you ask the court to exclude a witness like Marie Russell is because A, she's not qualified to talk about the things and make the conclusions that she's made. And you don't want to mislead the jury. Ditto Richard Green. And notice that he has no problem. And because ARCA, and his issue with ARCA, is that they didn't look at the totality of the evidence. And that will be interesting cross-examination if they do come in, for sure. But the idea is that you don't want to mislead a jury. You have to be qualified. It's not just that their conclusions, Hank Brennan disagrees with their conclusions. He says he doesn't want them to mislead a jury. If Karen Reed can find credible people to support her theory, and it's interesting that she can't find more credible people, I don't think that they're all going to have motions against them.
She can't say with any certainty that those were caused by a dog. Her fallback was when you look at the entire series of wounds, that equals a dog attack. No basis, no reason why we reached that bridge from uncertainty to dog attack other than just because she said so. That can't be challenged because there's no methodology. And so the risk we have is you have an expert who gets up in a voir dire and they give opinions that wound number 1 could have been teeth marks, could have been claw marks. Wound number 2 could have been teeth, could have been claw. Wound number 3 the same. Really no idea. It's just guessing or speculating. And then they get up later and they change their opinion that more benefits their side. She later testifies at trial, sometimes maintaining teeth or claws. And then she appears in this hearing after writing a report and consulting, and she is emphatic that these are not scratches, but that they are dog bites. Think about the posture of that. If she is now saying that these are dog bites and they're not scratches, and she's changed her opinion, that impliedly concedes that her testimony in front of the jury, for which she was allowed to testify as an expert, not only was inaccurate, not only unsure, but inevitably it's misleading. It cannot be helpful testimony if an expert provides an opinion to a jury and they, later on, without any real changes in information, changes their opinion for whatever reason. They're not constricted because there's no methodology. Opinions she no longer endorses or stands behind them. And the fact that we can reasonably conclude that is misleading to the jury, well, that begets the argument that she should not be given another chance to go in front of a jury and give a different opinion without having actual factual and medical and scientific support. And she does not. There is no doubt about one thing. She has no idea. When I walked her through the different wounds on Exhibit 5, I invited her to explain to Your Honor, why is it that this wound was caused by a dog? There's no circumstantial evidence to support that, none whatsoever. It's just her personal, empirical history dealing with dog injuries in the ER. And when I asked her for wound 1, what direction were these canines? She couldn't tell. Where's the puncture wound where the dog anchors and pulls? There is none. The distance and width of those wounds, how could she reasonably and fairly say they were caused by canines? Any indication, any support, any pattern recognition that would tell us that was caused by canines, and she couldn't give us any information. Not weak information, not information that I could fight with another expert, not information that I could say, wait, not the admissibility. None.
Right. So if she can't explain her methodology, you can't debunk it. You can't really debunk, well, because I've seen it before. I mean, this is like my lived experience. Have you ever heard young people saying that? Are you trying to refute my lived experience? How do you argue with that? Like, okay. Can we admire Hank Brennan's suit for the tailoring in his suit? That is some sharp tailoring.
To just fall back on, well, when I look at everything, it's a dog bite. Same thing with number 2. Number 2, interestingly, the widths are much different than wound number 1. It doesn't take an expert to know that it wasn't the same mechanism that caused the injuries to wound 1 and 2. And if they want to continue to pretend it's a dog bite on wound 1, there's no way they can reconcile that wound 1 is in any way similar to wound 2. It would have had to be a baby dog or a different dog or the pack of dogs I asked her about the first time I talked to her. It is totally different. And again, when I asked her for any specificity, these weren't hard leading questions. I opened to her to explain to us, why is that a dog bite now? She would only give us a conclusory answer. It just is. There was nothing about teeth or the tension or about the dog, about anything that would support the claim that that was a dog bite and why she changed it from the scratch. None. We get to the elbow wound number 3. There's the speculation that the arm could have moved, would have moved. Yet she has no idea. She has no factual support for this. None. And she vacillates between this being potentially bites, scratches. All 5 of the different points on wound number 3 could be canines on both sides, or maybe there was a 4-point canine in the smaller fraction of number 1 and number 2 in wound 3. That cannot be. It defies common sense and reasonableness to say the same dog caused wound number 3, points 1 and 2, the so-called punctures, and cause number 1 and number 2. Again, you can simply look at the distance between. Canines are not going to move when a dog bites an arm. An arm can move, it can change the angle, the depth. The canines are not going to move. Then we get to wound number 4, equally baseless. Wound number 4 at first wasn't sure if it even had to do with the dog attack. But then that made no sense. So Dr. Russell retreated to say, well, it did have something to do with the dog attack, but hard to define. And then wound number 5, again, a 4-point bite that is totally reconcilable with 1, 2, and 3. There is no collateral or supportive evidence to suggest that this is a dog bite at all. It's fertile imagination for her to get on the stand and claim that a dog bite. Not just that there was no opportunity and that there was no dog that touched her, but the wounds are dissimilar. She cannot point to a pattern, a methodology, a standard to say, this is why this is a dog bite. It's just a dog bite. So it's interesting when we learn that she didn't know about much of the evidence that wholly contradicts the fact.
Because if she knew about the evidence, it would make her unimportant to this very important trial that she so desperately wants to take part in. Hey, Heisenberg, my one word for her, delusion. Yeah, I said delusions of grandeur. I agree with you, Heisenberg. Delusions of grandeur. Unreal, right? Unreal. And I'm going to get to Vinnie Paladin and Julie Grant's guest, suggesting that this is another animal. And Vinnie Paladin being up in arms about prosecutorial misconduct. That's what he calls this show. Although he says that they didn't break the law. So then it's not misconduct. I'm personally offended because I like the killer, the accused killer, and I wanted her to get off. Ditto was it the Idaho case he brought up? He's decided that that's the way to go to support Brian Kohberger. Am I wrong? Or is it the other case? Is it Libby and Abby's case? Richard Allen wants to support that killer. We'll go over it. The amount of true crime grifters and innocence fraudsters is at a record high.
This is a dog bite. She didn't know.
All right. My computer is being temperamental, so I'm just going to have to pull this up one more time. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
And ignore reality and say this couldn't have been a car collision. It's funny that as a emergency room physician, she considers the basis of mechanics of injury based on what people tell her. If they come in and say, I got bit by a dog, or a parent says, my child was bit by a dog, they rely on statements of witnesses. She didn't rely on statements of witnesses here. I hit him. Oh my God, I hit him. Maybe I clipped him. Maybe I hit him in the knee. Maybe he dropped his phone. Whatever the statements were. All the various statements. An expert like her, as she proposes to be, would consider the witness statements to try to determine the cause of mechanic of injury. So for her to take the stand respectfully and suggest...
Right. That's like someone coming into the ER and saying, I could have done this, that, and the other. And you saying, oh no, you got bit by a dog. You don't even know it. Because I know, I've seen hundreds of thousands of dog bites. Gene DRZ, thanks for the super sticker.
For a moment, that this was not caused by the collision to Mr. O'Keefe, not only with any no factual basis, in defiance of actual fact. It's repugnant to the sense of fairness in the courtroom. A witness, just because they have experience as a doctor, doesn't mean they can just come into court and say what they want and then let the government try to counter it. That's not how it works. And so when we consider not only what she doesn't know, but what she chose not to know, it is overwhelming. This is not a qualified person to come in and talk about dog bites. From her perspective, she's probably one, if not a few people in the country who can even do this kind of thing, which suggests that there is no real methodology. If she is the only expert in the country, it is not generally accepted in the community. It can't be. It can't be. And as much as the defense may want her to testify to promote this theory, she does not have the credentials and qualifications to do that. She didn't even take the basic steps, as you'll see in some of the literature, of going to the dog. Chloe, they knew we found Chloe. They know we've done molds. And she says they told her. And she tried to fight with every posture and angle that may be important, but she didn't need to do that. I dare say.
Right, she doesn't need to do it. Right. See, kudos to Hank Brennan for reading. Everything that I've read says the dog is hugely important, but not to Marie Russell because she makes up the rules in her head. So for all those, I knew that after this, I knew that Alessi was going to go with the argument, go to her rights, that this is Karen Reed's right. Yes, Karen Reed has a right to put up defense experts. She has a right to defend herself, but she does not have a right to unqualified experts. That is not a right.
If she had taken some steps to try to do due diligence, it wouldn't have ended well for her theory. Perhaps that's why she didn't. She doesn't have the qualifications. She doesn't have the experience. She doesn't have the methodology. Her willingness to tell opinions that are speculative, factually wrong, not based in science and math, should disqualify her from giving another baseless opinion about a so-called dog bite wound. There is no DNA. There is plastic shards in his arm. She has done no due diligence. And she can't describe any methodology because there is none.
Right. Vinny says it's unethical for a defense attorney to act as the role of prosecutor. He argues that a prosecutor cannot be so tough on a witness. But when Alan Jackson was hammering Jennifer McCabe et al., the rest of the witnesses in this case, Vinny was cheering him on. Hank Brennan was a defense attorney, but he was also a prosecutor. And I'm sure he cross-examines the same way. And I'm sure he's tough in whatever case he's arguing. Vinny doesn't like it because it doesn't make Free Karen Reed movement look good. It exposes them for the fraudsters that they are, and thus Vinny for the fraudster, innocent fraudster that he is. My opinion. And if you talk to lawyers who are practicing in this field, they don't think much of these court TV, law and crime talking heads. Some of the off-the-record comments, dumbest people, don't know anything. Because if they were such great lawyers, they would be trying cases and not talking heads on social media. And they go where they're reliant on big ratings and big views. So they go with the innocence fraud campaigns more often than not. They're still talking about how DNA is going to solve cases that aren't DNA cases, whether it's the West Memphis 3 or John Benet Ramsey, doing whole shows on it. And they know that DNA is never going to solve those cases. And I can go into the reasons why, but it should be obvious if you know what those cases are about.
Changed her testimony from hearing to hearing, and we should not let that happen again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Alessi.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So I'll spare you Robert Alessi's long and boring closing. But it's basically Karen Reed has a right to defend herself. Don't take away her right. And then he just retestified for Marie Russell. Quickly, before I go, let's just dip into your comments and talk about them for a second.
We got your comments. You had something to say. You were insightful. Oh, so clever. So Roberta's going to read your comments. Hey, Roberta, read those comments.
So encouraging. I will read those comments. Mike says she's an expert on the Turtle Boy talking point, lies about the case. That's about it. So right, Mike. Sleazy Moves says, ugh, just saw Vinnie Politan's channel post something about this and called it prosecutorial madness. Of course, he's kowtowing to the mob, just like he did in the Richard Allen trial. Yeah, it was probably about Richard Allen. Makes me lose faith with people I once thought had integrity. Did you really think Vinnie Politan had integrity? Oh boy, LOL. There are a few creators I could not watch after the Allen trial, and I feel like this retrial will have the same effect. LOL. Dana Sutton 101 says, a person accused has the right to a defense. Spelled the European way. Some people believe she is an expert, but it's not about what some people believe, Donna. She is questioned by both sides, and it's the jury to decide if she makes sense. No, it's literally not the jury that decides. It's the judge that decides. And there are criteria, including methodology. But it's not about, what some people believe does not make it so. If some people believe that I am the cat expert, does not make me an expert in cats, even if I believe it. Some people, the court of public opinion should have little place in the courtroom. Unfortunately, it has too much place. She's questioned by both sides. That's why we had a hearing, because one side challenges her competency and her self-proclaimed expertise. And it's the jury to decide if she makes sense. No, it's the judge. Go to Daubert. That's how the law works. So that is, she is free to get another dog expert or a bite expert she wants. There's nothing saying that she can't bring a qualified dog expert. I just think that there are a few that would be willing to testify with the totality of the evidence that the wounds on John O'Keefe's arm are from a dog. It came from the mind of Karen Reed, from her imagination. Thumper says, I believe that Roberta is my cat expert every day of the week. Meow, Roberta. See? Some people believe it. Let me testify. Where's my $600 an hour? I'm just pulling that randomly up. So it's not even a dog bite. She's a self-proclaimed expert. Yeah. Anybody else have any comments or questions before I go? I think I'm going to wind it down. Thank you for listening. I'm off tomorrow. If I have the right day, it's Thursday, right? I'm off tomorrow. But I will be back Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a terrific night, everyone. I'm going to end the way I usually end my episodes, with my song about Karen Reed. I hit my boyfriend with my car. Have a great night, everyone, and a great Friday. See you Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mom. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet. I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mark. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet. John.